Hi, I'm Gordon Lamphere, and welcome to the Real Finds podcast, where we have real conversations with key entrepreneurs, activists, and researchers who are shaping the real estate industry and, as a result, our world. On today's podcast, we'll be speaking with Mike Herl from Madison Commercial Real Estate. Mike is a commercial real estate industry veteran who's done some of Madison's largest deals in the multifamily, industrial, retail, and office asset classes. On the podcast, we take a deep dive into what's going on in Madison, how private equity is reshaping student housing in the Big Ten, and why new builds are shaking up the industrial market in Illinois and Wisconsin. Last, we look at how touring with Mötley Crüe, REO Speedwagon, and Cheap Trick translated well into the rock stars of the real estate game.
Mike, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So, how does one get from touring with rock bands to large commercial real estate deals? It seems like a unique path into the industry.
Well, in my situation, I spent the first half of my adult life, 17 years. I traveled around the world touring with rock bands, and I was preparing for an exit. Had a wife and a couple of kids at home, and touring with band members who act like children versus having real children who need a dad around and not a babysitter. Um, I had already been preparing, uh, taking the classes that I need, starting when I came home from tours, starting to get to know the locals. Um, for a long time, for years, I knew how to get from the airport to my house and back. I didn't know much more about the Madison area for, the first 11 or 12 years that I lived here. 9/11 changed everything. It changed the entire touring business. And it went from really being a lot of fun to no longer being all that much fun. But I knew pretty much everybody in the rock and roll business here in the Midwest. A lot of the Chicago folks. I know, the Steve Albini, Smashing Pumpkins, um, you know, REO Speedwagon. I toured with Cheap Trick forever. So enough's enough. Those were the people that I was around constantly. Jam Productions. That was kind of my orbit for a long time. But 9/11 changed the entire business. And I lasted, I think, another 8 months after 9/11, and it was time to hang up the spurs because all the new rules that came into place with touring, and it's a young man's game. I did 3,500 rock shows. That's a lot of rock shows to do in 17 years, and I don't know a whole lot of tour managers out there that even come close to half of that. But it was time. I was 37 years old, and it was time to make a change.
That's gosh darn impressive. In terms of impressive things, though, you've done a lot of pretty large deals in Madison, and I'm curious why Madison as a market. You probably had a lot of opportunities touring around to see a lot of markets all around the world. Why do you choose to focus on Madison?
Well, again, circumstances dictated to me where I was going to live. My wife was from Madison. We had two kids here, and she informed me after I hung up my spurs that she wasn't leaving. So she's telling me that if you're going to find something to do here, and you're going to have to, take care of us. So I had grown up in a residential brokerage in northern Colorado. I grew up in Loveland, Colorado, and my parents owned a large brokerage there, residential. And I was not a residential kind of guy. After years and years of watching all the ups and downs that my parents went through, um, one of the key things, the reason why I chose commercial real estate was there's too much emotion involved in a residential deal. People making a house a home. versus investment deals and businesses trying to find something where the numbers work. There's very little emotion involved in it. So that's the reason why I did that. I was quick to find out that a lot of the landlords and developers were just as egotistical and driven as rock stars. So it was actually quite an easy transition as far as dealing with the personalities. I, it was almost, I didn't even really notice the difference, to tell you the truth. It was just, instead of, getting 60 pirates traveling from one city to another, I'm sitting down with, a developer or a landlord and his team, and, um, cutting deals and starting to do things. So it was actually, it was a lot easier of a transition than I thought it would be.
Yeah, there are definitely some developers out there that fashion themselves rock stars. In terms of kind of that world perspective, how do you go about? You built a pretty robust practice in Madison. How do you go about starting out and kind of building a practice? Did you? What was the path that you took to going out on your own?
Well, when I first got off the road, I actually went and I contacted, I think, 3 or 4 developers and investment real estate companies, and I simply asked the owners if I could just have about 20 minutes of their time, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But what can an old road dog like myself do? I settled hundreds of thousands of dollar shows. You pick up a $500,000 one night for a rock show, and you're going through everything and making sure that the band has been compensated for the peanuts, the popcorn, and the parking, and all of that kind of stuff. So you're constantly going through the contracts and things like that. And, that's what I was talking to these folks about is, this is my skill set. What do you think someone like me can do in real estate? I think it was the third person I talked to. He created a job for me immediately. I asked for 20 minutes. He gave me 4 hours. And when I walked out of there, I actually went home, and my wife asked me how it went. I said, I think I got a job. I'm not quite sure. But I get the phone call the next day, said to come on in and meet the entire staff. We want to bring you aboard. We want you to, at the time, this firm had like 35 shopping center properties all over the state of Wisconsin, and they wanted to go in-house with their brokerage instead of using brokers all over the state. And that gave me the opportunity to learn how to set up a brokerage. It learns all the ins and outs, everything that goes with it, and which was a wonderful, wonderful exercise to go through. And I'm forever in debt of my first employer here. He's still a dear friend to this day. But I stayed with him for 2.5 years, and next thing you know, the headhunters were coming out. Office was really starting to take off in this area, and I had cut my teeth in retail. But they kept telling me and trying to convince me that office was easier. So I actually jumped ship and went to another small brokerage, and cut my teeth, in the office world. And I have to admit, it was a lot easier path than in the retail world. Then this small brokerage that I was with got swallowed up by a national tag. And I actually was the broker for this national tag in their Madison office for 11 years then. And it was probably about, I think it was late 2015. They decided they're going to close up this shop. The tertiary markets were no longer attractive to them. And so I sat down with my team, explained to them that they're going to shut us down in 2 months and we need to find someplace else to go. And as we traveled around and sat and talked with other brokerages, Madison is full of boutique brokerages. And, it just dawned on us at dinner one night, all of us were together, Why do we want to join it with another boutique brokerage? Why don't we just start our own? We have a pretty good team here. We got, very, very good clients who want to stick with us. And so that's why we decided to go out on our own. Yeah, we have a very, very good team here. I think there's 12 of us here now. We have general contracting, we have lab design. We've done very well. Well, as soon as you start making, big gains in the market, next thing you know, all the national tags are knocking on your door again, and they're asking us to join up with them. And I'm sitting there asking them, very simple questions. Our signs are very unique. Badger colors. Do we have to give up our color scheme? Yes. Do we have to give up Madison Commercial? Yes. Well, Madison Commercial, we named our company that because when people outside of the area are Googling commercial in Madison, Wisconsin, they're going to get us first. So, I wasn't going to, I've already been through the national tag thing, and all of the people that are with me here, we've all been with national tags. And we just decided that instead of going by, the corporate thumb, we're going to go ahead and create our own little corporate thumb here and make it more of a family type organization. We never really wanted to get above 6 or 7 people, but we're about double that now. And we're just trying to, be the best that we could possibly be and make it a place that people don't ever want to leave.
So one of the things you touched on earlier was that office is easier than retail to broker. I'm curious, what did you feel those big differences were?
Well, first of all, we're talking 20 years ago. We're not talking today. It's flipped today. So,
So now I'm really curious, right? So from your perspective, so what do you think was easier about retail or easier about office 20 years ago, and now what are you seeing?
well, as far as office 20 years ago, I mean, even if it was if it was raw space, the landlords were willing to do 70-80%, if not 100% of your build out for you, and go from there. In retail, you had to teach people what is a warm white box versus a cold shell, a tenant improvement allowance of $25 a square foot. The people walk in and they see, a dirt floor in retail and there's no bathroom, but they see the piping for it. They don't see any sheetrock on the walls, and they're like, okay, but I get $25 a square foot. Yeah, but that's probably going to just put in your HVAC system. That's probably all that's going to cover. And so the rest of it is on me. Yes, the rest of it is on you. It was, you had to be really dedicated to your retail idea to pursue that. And the other thing was, what I didn't like in the retail world is young entrepreneurs who are coming into the market. They wouldn't really look at virgin space. They would be more so looking at second generation space, and there's still modifications that are going to have to take place to that space. But it was kind of shocking to me how, because they were new to the business, where they couldn't get loans, so they were putting improvements on their credit cards. They are doing second mortgages, to pay for all this kind of stuff and get their initial inventory together, things like that. So that process was, okay, I am going to become a specialist at reading your business plan. And I'm going to walk you through your business plan. And I need you to make sure before you start putting all kinds of charges on a credit card or second mortgaging your home, that you clearly understand what it means to run a retail business. There are no vacations. Your busy months are going to likely be over the holidays. And you need to piece all this together and let me look at it. And I always explain to them, I would much rather lose you now okay, at this point of going through your business plan and you fully understanding the endeavor you're about to embark on versus talking a landlord into, getting you into a space, you doing all of these improvements, going out of business 2 years later. And now it's up to the landlord to go in there and start gutting a lot of the stuff that you did to the inside of the building. It's, the business plan inside a retail business was imperative. As far as office is concerned, people were already in some kind of office type atmosphere. Um, or, even at home, they're operating out of an office at home. Well, they know how they want it set up. They know what works for them already. Uh, Second generation space, they could make modest modifications and make almost anything work. So those were the big differences. Obviously today it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I got caught up in the office market. I personally purchased 7 office properties, and I'm telling you, it's been a struggle the last couple of years. I'm still licking my wounds a little bit here, but we're starting to finally start coming out of the doldrums, so to speak. But it's interesting to see how 20 years ago you can, I was doing 10,000, 20,000, 40,000, 60,000 square foot office deals. And today it's like, my goodness, 3,500 square feet and below is really the majority of the action that you see right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we just sent through the SIR world a 10,000-foot office deal into another market, and the people picked up the phones and were like, "Oh, wow, 10,000 feet." And we're sitting there going, I mean, it's a deal. It's not like
Yeah.
a huge deal, right? But one of the things that has helped Madison get not necessarily huge deals, but a lot of deals, I think you have a robust office culture there, is primarily like the life sciences world, right?
Oh yeah.
Hasn't that driven a lot of business in Madison? I know we have a client that might be potentially looking up there. And
Well, I got a broker for them.
yeah, and the university system has been huge for that. So can you talk a little bit about Madison in terms of kind of how the office market has evolved and life science in particular?
Yeah. So, again, it's really something, to watch the ebbs and flows of not just the real estate market, the Madison community in general. Literally, I would say 10, 11 years ago, the big topic that city leaders and business owners were struggling with is what we call the brain drain. We have this massive university, anywhere from 48,000 to 53,000 students every year, right dead smack in the middle of Madison, along with, our state government all being right here. And my goodness, we were just growing so modestly, and people would come into town, they would get a heck of a world-class education, and then skedaddle, gone. My first 10 years in this business, we laugh about it now, but it really became a situation where we have, the infamous Grass Camp School here, one of the best real estate schools literally in the Midwest, if not the country.
Oh no, it's terrific. Yeah.
And we would have, I know a lot of the professors down there, and they would call me up and they said, "I've got this kid. You need to have this kid come in and intern for you. He wants to stay in the area, da 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 da." 18 interns in a row I hired out of the Grass Camp School and taught them what we know, let them use what they learned from school, real world experience with us. And within a year, they saw greener pastures in Chicago and New York and all the big cities. That's where they wanted to go. And we couldn't keep the talent here. And then one day we have a commercial brokers group here. One time we were having an after office mixer one night, and we were looking around, and literally 2/3 of the members were over 50 years old. And we were really concerned if we don't get some young youth to stick around here, I mean, who are we going to be handing this real estate market over to? Well, when Epic Systems kicked into high gear of hiring, um, the kids right out of college, um, and growing their Verona campus by leaps and bounds, and then Exact Sciences um, doing the same thing. When they set up shop on the southwest side of Madison, they started hiring and growing, and all of a sudden, these kids were either sticking around or coming in from other college campuses and loving the area, loving the lakes that we have here, just really liking the vibe of the entire culture here. And that's what's really sparked it. So now suddenly we're experiencing on average of about 7% growth in Dane County every single year. When we look at the other 71 counties, um, it appears that there's about 3 counties that are growing um, above 4% every single year, in county being the fastest out of all of them. And we've had a migration come in here of young folks, millennials and Gen Z, I guess they're called, and we have them moving here in droves, and it's really been something to watch. So literally, in a 10-year period, we went from brain drain trying to keep any kid that graduated from the UW to stay to suddenly they're just coming from everywhere.
So every market that's growing has all sorts of frictions. And I'm curious if you could touch on kind of what you're seeing in Madison with that growth in terms of infrastructure challenges, zoning challenges, and Madison's a pretty political city, political friction.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Uh, this is I got to be very delicate here. I'm already when an application with my name comes through the city there, it gets a little extra scrutiny. So I got to be careful about what I say. But what I would say is this. Um, yes, it is a very political town. Yes, it is very, very left wing as far as city government goes. Um, the, the problem comes when you have developers, especially from out of the area right now, who come here and are not quite used to the the amount of scrutiny that goes onto a project. Um, it kind of shocks them, and if they try to do it on their own, they will usually fail the first time. Usually, what they'll end up doing is hiring people like us, or we have large builders like Findorf and others of that nature that specialize in dealing with the personalities downtown and walk them through the process. And as long as they team up with somebody here, you see it really happening. We have a group which Madison Commercial is a part of. It's called Smart Growth Madison, and it's an influencing group where we try to uh, the developers, the real estate agents, the title companies, the real estate attorneys. We all belong to this group, and like I said, it's called Smart Growth Madison. And what we do is we try to have influence uh, in municipal leaders, mayors, planning commission, all these folks, um, to understand the rules and regulations that they're trying to put up, because they're trying to make things easier for the bureaucracy to control things, not realizing, because they've never built a treehouse themselves, what it's doing to us as developers and real estate people. So the problem is, when you have turnover every 2 years in all these municipalities, you're in this constant mode of having to educate the newbies who are coming aboard. And that's one of the hardest problems. When Madison really started blowing up here a few years back, we had some pretty good size landlords and developers who capitalized on it massively. They controlled a lot of dilapidated product, old 2-story student housing throughout the downtown Madison area and campus area. When these kids, when they started increasing the amount of kids that were coming to the UW and the kids that were moving here, they capitalized on it. They tore down their old crappy student housing and built these beautiful student housing facilities. And boy, did that catch the eye of the outside developers who specialize in that kind of stuff. And they swarmed in here. Me and my partners, we were lucky enough to score one of the big ones out of Chicago. And we've done, I think, 4 or 5 of the biggest student housing projects. We assembled the properties for them, and they're enormous and they're beautiful. I just often joke the kids today that come into college, they don't really have the college experience that we had. It's walking into one of the nicest places they probably ever lived in their lives. And it's really quite something. These outside developers have just swarmed here to the Madison market. Kind of, and we're partly responsible here. We were told that we actually scored the highest per square foot price for dirt in the history of downtown Madison. I think they said it was something like $785 a square foot last year. But when you're going to put 1,700 student beds on it, you could afford that. What's kind of funny about it is people, landowners within a half a mile of the campus, they think that their properties are now worth $785 a square foot, and it's not. There's no underground parking or anything like that in these facilities. So these kids are they're just walking across the street to the campus. If they have to go a half mile in the winters that we have here, forget it. So it's the ebbs and flows of things. So people right around the campus area, yeah, you've got a gold mine as far as what your dirt is worth right now. The folks, just a matter of blocks away, you're half the price. But that doesn't stop them from trying to get as much as they can. And the local developers here now, they're just like, well, I can't afford the dirt price anymore. And of course, with inflation and everything that's happened. So they've kind of taken a back seat. But now you have, like I said, every developer in student housing and multifamily have poured in here. And it's insane the amount of apartments that they have built. And
Why do you think that is? That student housing, and we've seen this generally across the board in so many markets that we're in. Why do you think student housing is able to attract so much institutional money versus so many other multifamily asset classes that are, there is a lot of institutional money, but nothing to the degree of student housing?
well, here's what's interesting about it is the returns that institutional money expects versus what a guy who's out there wildcatting on doing his project. The norm was 10 years ago when we're going to build something, we needed to get a 15% return, to make it worth our while. It was, make it worth the gamble. But when you have this institutional money come in and they're basically telling us all they need is a 4 or 5% return, they're willing to spend a lot more money on, either high-end existing product or dilapidated stuff to tear down.
Oh, that's
And
wild.
you'll see that a lot of these huge developers either have or are in cahoots with a REIT of some sort. They'll go in and develop it, get their developer's fee, and then turn right around and flip it over to the REIT.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we've seen with some institutional deals in the industrial sector as well, where
Hmm.
there there's some of the some of the earnings that they're getting, it's not much.
No, it's
And and like, yeah, most of what we work with typically is we would say is like medium size and sub-institutional investors who are getting much larger percentage profits on deals. And you see folks afterwards at the bar that are from some of these larger firms that are working with institutional players, and you'll look at how a deal pencils, and it's a very different world, which is it's different. h- h- Mentioning industrial, how has Dane County fared in terms of industrial versus some of the other asset classes that we've talked about today?
well, again, it's what's crazy is the ebbs and flows of what you see. So I'll say 6, 7 years ago, um, the metal skin buildings um, that were built for the last 50 to 75 years around here was the norm. And then suddenly uh, it became mandatory, to do the tilt up. And so people that were used to paying, you know, $5, $6, $7 a square foot net, now all of a sudden, the only thing you can find out there in newer product to have the higher heights, clear heights, and bigger doors and loading docks, all that kind of stuff. It's tilt up and it's double the cost. So we went through a period of time where the there wasn't enough available, especially during the COVID years when everybody needed warehousing for distribution, this, that, and the other. And we saw a huge spike in the pricing for you know product that a few years ago would have sold for $40 to $50 a square foot. Now suddenly it's 80, 90 to $100 a square foot and to purchase it. And so again, a lot of Chicago-based, area-based companies came up here and started building this mass tilt up all along the interstate system up here. And you started seeing, they got aggressive on their pricing and started stealing away some of these larger tenants around here. And literally in an 18-month period, we saw the value of old metal skin buildings literally plummet. We saw pricing plummet by 25% in an 18-month period because of all of the tilt up that was built and companies adjusting, needing that, like I said, that bigger clear height, that um, thicker concrete, levelers on all the loading docks, things of that nature. So it took a few years for people to buck up and say, this old building isn't working for me anymore. But I can't afford that tilt up. So, instead of getting, 25,000 square feet of tilt up, maybe I can adjust my business plan and get it all in 2,500 and just stack things higher. So that's kind of what we saw happen in the last few years. There's not in our business parks around here. First of all, Madison isn't Madison in the greater Madison area. They've redone their zoning. They do not want heavy manufacturing around the communities at all. So they've redone their zoning codes to kind of prevent the heavy manufacturing user to come into the area. And we're actually working with several heavy manufacturers and light manufacturers right now who want to come into this market, but you can't find anything for them, the existing, but then trying to find land out there that has that zoning that would have the infrastructure and utilities that they would need to do their businesses. So that's kind of the part of the business that we're in right now, is trying to find out where can we locate these businesses, what community out there is going to open their arms because we saw DeForest do it. We saw Verona do it. They see where the weakness is. With Madison, a few years back said, where they instituted a no more big box. They went, no more big box stores here. Lowe's wants to come to town. No, we don't want them. So the communities outside of Madison here are saying, hey, come to us. And they have. So you've seen communities like DeForest explode, Verona, Middleton. It's really quite something that they've done a lot to try to stop urban sprawl. But when you say no to everything, they got to go somewhere. So
yeah, and then the sprawl just moves right across a municipal line. In terms of lines, I knew you drew kind of a line in the sand earlier about how that there've been this change in product that's occurred, and that there's a lot of older product that was partially left behind. Are there users going into some of that older, outdated product, or are we seeing in Madison a large vacancy in kind of older product?
sale of these types of properties are definitely they're hot items. Companies will, they may have a larger unit outside of the city of Madison, but they want something inside of Madison also. So they're snapping them up. I'm still seeing ridiculous prices like a 6,000 square foot building with one loading dock and 4 parking spaces, selling, asking $120 a square foot for empty. You're seeing crazy stuff like that. I don't know if they'll get it, but we've seen the pricing for that type of old product, moderate in that $80 to $90 range. But yeah, it's backfilling. Now, what's kind of funny about it is then you'll see, a space perfectly, set up for a user. We have one out on the west side of town, 12,500 square feet, but it can't be demised. And they're having a heck of a time finding someone to lease that space. It's been out there for months. The brokers called me a couple of times asking me, do you know of anything you could do to help? But if that building went up for sale, it would be snapped up in a heartbeat. But trying to lease, that size of space, it was a no-brainer a couple of years ago. But right now, it's that's the size that people don't want.
Yeah,
But that'll change in a year.
yeah. I mean, we definitely see those troublesome sizes in our market too. For us, it's like that. Those properties that are somewhere between probably 50 and 100, that are, those 70,000 foot buildings that they just sit for ages. And it's this weird conundrum where, you have your operations guy says, I need a 50 or I need 100.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody built a building that was, 75,000 feet, and it sits for ages. So yeah, we see those kind of things happen in our market too.
Well, Southwest or Southeast, I'm sorry, Southeast Wisconsin. There's a 3-letter developer out of Chicago who has built an enormous amount of tilt up all up and down the interstate corridors. That I drive by them all the time and they're empty. They
Yeah.
built and built and built. And
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who you're talking about, and I'm not gonna mention them directly, but I think a lot of our other listeners will, and if you
yeah,
wanna call me, I'll tell you on the phone.
yeah.
But, in terms of that, I think a lot of those developers I can only speak to, the Kenosha market, the, Racine market, the
Mhm.
Walworth market, but, because those are the markets I'm primarily operating in, as well, even up into Waukesha. But there's been a lot of development there, and I'm sure in Madison as well. And a lot of it was in 2022, 2023, and some of the um, monetary constraints to those deals have made pricing uh, pretty rich for some of those leases. Like
Yeah.
we see some leases where they're looking for like a 10 net on an industrial property, and it just doesn't make sense for a lot of users in a market that's not, New York or Chicago.
Yeah, I agree. Um, But now these data centers, um, it's shocking to me. What I mean, down in the Mount Pleasant area there, where you're kind of familiar with that market down there, the amount of data centers that they're going to build down there is, um, I mean, it's crazy, and God bless them. I think it's absolutely terrific. But now, uh, one of the big ones, built a mega facility outside of Beaver Dam, and of course the mega one up in Port Washington. But what's fascinating again is we kind of call it the Madison disease. This we want to keep a small town feel, and we don't want to give up our farmland. But I can't think of anything less intrusive to a community than a data center. But they just killed one outside of DeForest earlier this week. They killed it, and it was going to be 450 acres. It was, to me, it was a perfect site for it. But they've decided that they don't want data centers around here now. So this thing of Dane County wanting to pick and choose what they have here to the detriment of the community, it makes things more and more difficult. I just think about the sheer amount of property tax that would have been generated by such a facility for DeForest. Would
Yeah.
have been absolutely incredible for them. Just like when Epic Systems built their mega campus out there in Verona, they gave them a heck of a TIF deal, where they didn't have to pay anything for about 20 years. But man, that first year that they did, boy, they went on, it,
Yeah.
they, the city went on a spending spree, and, but they're still doing wonderful from it. But I'm afraid that's the next part of this again. I honestly think that the communities that are just outside of Dane County are going to be the big winners here in the next 10 years. A case study is anybody who's into hunting and guns and things like that. Vortex. All right. Vortex is the most elite optics company. All right. The military, big DoD contracts, you name it. They started off in Middleton as just a guy and his wife that wanted to build a better binocular for bird watching. And it exploded, and they wanted to stay in Middleton, and all their employees were from Middleton. And Middleton decided when they wanted to expand, no, we don't want a facility like that here. So they went down Highway 151. They're in Barneveld now, right over the Dane County line. It is a mega structure, and it's incredible. It's an absolutely and state-of-the-art, incredible facility. And when you look at where their employees come from, they live here in Southwest Madison, Verona, Mount Horeb. They drive down to work, and then they come home at night. But I just think of look at the property taxes that you people gave up.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there's one thing we won't give up on, and that's we always do our final four. It's a nice, fun way to wrap up the episode. And one of the topics that I love is what's the one topic that we haven't discussed today that the industry isn't talking enough about?
I honestly think the migration of what's taken place here. When you look at the state of Wisconsin, yeah, we have 3 counties that are growing, but in 20 years, I mean, they're predicting our statewide population will go down by 4%. We have a lot of youngsters that are moving here to Dane County, but so many of our older folks are dying off, are moving to the warmer climates. And that's kind of worrisome. You know, I think Dane County will be insulated from it, but as far as the state of Wisconsin, um, I don't know that we need a policy change. Politically, we need a policy change to keep bringing in business and data centers and things like that, things that are going to make people move to other parts of the state. Um, every morning I go into my office at home at 5:30 in the morning, and there's 9 trades emails that I get every morning just so I stay up on things. And one of the things that it's just fascinating to watch is the self-inflicted wounds that you see states making on themselves, where they're literally forcing the the entrepreneurs, the people who have made money, the businesses, they're literally forcing them out with bad policy. And the migration out of those states, and to warmer climates and things like that, it's kind of staggering. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
the
we've
Texas
had
market, my God,
we
I
we
can't. If you're
we've
not
had a
making money in real estate in Texas, there get out.
No, and Florida and Georgia and
Yeah.
Arizona. I mean, we've had a lot of folks on our podcast, and we're gonna have more that have, they're policy experts that deal with this exact topic, right? And I think we've seen overwhelmingly. There's in Illinois, I can speak to, in southern Wisconsin, the southern counties, because those are the areas I know, right?
Mhm.
And there's not enough housing for people. There's not enough. Emphasis on trying to keep businesses here. And, as a result, it becomes hard for businesses to stay and provide jobs and people to have locations to keep their homes. And so for us, I don't care who's in the Madison State House or in Springfield or really to a degree, but as my wife would say, y'all got to do that. Like you got to provide housing, you got to provide jobs because those are the opportunities that keep people here and keep the economy going. And whoever does that, they've got my vote. And that's kind of my perspective on the whole topic. And that's a topic that we are not talking enough about.
I agree. And I don't know what it's like down there in Illinois right now as far as property taxes, but we got zinged. And, the last 2 years, I mean, my goodness, I don't know. We've got, I'm not a big fan of this mayor, but they have gone on a spending spree, trying to make us as much like, Manhattan as they can, with mixed use absolutely everywhere, um, trying to get everybody to ride the bus. One thing after another. It's just been an overwhelming push, and people are like, okay, this is way too much change too fast, and they're pushing back. And that's you have so many old folks who have been here their entire life, and they're like, I can't afford my property taxes. So we have several people running for county board this April, um, that have an incredible opportunity in front of them here to be able to sit there and say, we're gonna push back on the property tax situation here because you're forcing old folks to have to figure what are they going to do. It's an overwhelming problem here, and they keep packing up debt here in Dane County and in the city of Madison, and it's really something, and something's going to break here. And I hope that we don't lose our seasoned citizens here because um, they can't afford to stay in their housing. But on top of that, you know, national fiscal policy. My goodness, there's got to be a little bit of easing, even more easing on interest rates here, because the sheer amount of these kids that are moving here. I mean, we've got these what we call Soviet style uh, apartment buildings. It's
I
a
look,
box with a bunch of boxes in it.
I
I mean,
I know
everywhere.
I've got a bunch of Badgers that are in our family, so I've been up
Yeah,
to Madison plenty of times. Yeah.
it's just it looks like in my travels around communist countries and it's the same style. It's just box with a bunch of boxes in it, and they're
And
ugly.
to be fair, there are more colors often in the Madison market, but,
That is true. That is true. I would give you that one. But
uh,
but if these kids can't, when to have, I mean, when you have kids, putting off having kids so they and getting pets instead, that's a problem. We gotta get these kids into their own American dream and be able to allow them to have families. It's just so hard to do it in apartment buildings,
yeah,
and things like that. So that's one of the things I really hope that um, we get under control here soon. Um, because we're starting to see these bedroom communities spring up all outside of the Dane County area. And it's unfortunate that, that's where young folks have to go. Um, we have, on average, I think the last number I saw, 155,000 people travel from outside of the county into the county every single day to work. And about 40,000 are here in Dane County who travel outside of the county. So that tells you a lot right there.
yeah, yeah. So one of the questions that we love to talk about on the podcast is, and I think you see this definitively, and see some great answers from particularly some of our guests because they're men and women in the arena. Where do you think commercial real estate is going 10 years from now?
You know, the, again, going back to, looking at these trades every single morning, it's really quite something. You see two paths that people are saying are going to take place here. You got the Elon Musk crowd that are sitting there saying that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, no one's going to have to work anymore. You know, um, AI is going to take over. The robots are going to, be doing all of this, and people will be able to afford a home again and live a more leisurely life. Then the other side of everything is showing that we need more skilled workers. There's certain things that robots and AI are not going to be able to do. You can't really have a robot climb up on a roof to fix HVAC, and plumbers to get underneath and fix plumbing issues and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of funny. You see it going in two different directions. I see I see a consolidation of mega companies. I don't know if PEs. I really don't know if how long this private equity craze is going to last. They're swallowing up everything, but I'm not really seeing great returns from these private equity firms that are just,
Yeah,
I think, are overpaying for all these quote unquote family businesses that they're buying. But I see consolidation with bigger businesses. I see the data centers are definitely going to be huge and be around for the rest of my life at least. Um, but my money is service based, service type real estate for the entrepreneurs. I don't think that entrepreneurial spirit is ever going to leave. Um, I think it's always going to be there.
yeah.
And
I
just
think
like,
you're all
these retailers, we're not going to have retail anymore. Everything's going to be delivered to your door. Well, 3 or 4 years later, people want to go look at it before they have it shipped to their house because they start seeing how inconvenient it is to show up, try it on. Oh, crap. Now I got to go ahead and send the thing back. They're going back to the stores. They want to see things again. They want to feel things again.
yeah,
And
that's
so
a
I
huge
honestly think that,
yeah, that's a huge movement in Gen Z that I don't think people who are not looking close enough at retail is that. I'm a millennial, right? So our generation is less about going to places and seeing it, but I even have like my younger brother who's Gen Z, and you know his generation that they want to go to the store, like, and I think there's an element of the power of tactile, of being able to hold it in your hands and be
yeah,
like, yeah, you know what, this is the right product for me. Um, one of the questions that we love on the podcast too, as well as um, that many of our listeners hold dear is we bring on people who've been very successful in their careers often, and we love to travel back to the start of your career. And so, if you could say for 30 seconds one little tidbit of advice to your young self, what would it be?
Well, I'm a product of the 80s, where doing everything to excess was the minimum. And I would tell my young self, yeah, touring around the world was an incredible experience. Um, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I shouldn't have waited until I was 37 to break into this business. I should have done 2 or 3 world tours instead of 13, and got off the road and went into real estate and had a more of a family life, um, and putting down roots faster. Because when you're 37 years old and you're introducing yourself to people for the first time, they were more interested in talking about, oh my God, you were out on the road. Tell me what that's like. Tell me what that's like. Well, I'm trying to talk to them about, trust me as your real estate broker. Yeah, I haven't done anything yet, but yeah, I toured with Mötley Crüe. Okay. What do you think they're going to want to talk about? So that's what I would say to myself is get off, go get some world experience. I told my kids the best education you could have is 2 years of business school at a tech college, and then 2 years of travel around the world, and see just how damn lucky you are to be here and get that real world experience, and figure out what you want to do, and jump into it with a vengeance, and attack it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Now, there's one little bit that we will never let you get away with, and that's we won't let you get off the podcast without telling us the next person that we should have on. Somebody who's influencing the world of real estate or policy. Who should be our next guest?
Becoming an SIOR and going to the conventions and seeing the young talent that in real estate around the country and from around the world. I'm 61 years old, and I'm absolutely enamored with a couple of folks who are in their late 30s. Is it all right if I give you this gentleman's name out of Houston here?
Y- Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah.
Ryan Hartzell. So Ryan it's HARTSELL, and he runs a brokerage out of Houston. To me, he's just he's probably my biggest influence right now in SIOR.
Well, we have to have him on. So, but now there's one last question that we'll ask you, and that's an important one. It's if somebody wants to get in contact, what's the best way?
Well, the best way to get in contact with me is directly by my cell phone or by my email. First, my email address is Mike.Herl, Herl, not URL, HERL, at Madison Commercial, RE as in real estate.com. And my cell phone number is 608-212-4623.
Mike, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today, and we'd
It's
love to
been
have you on in the
fun.
future.
Been a lot of fun.
Thanks again to Mike. We appreciate his insights. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. Your comments, subscriptions, and interactions truly matter and help us continue to get quality guests. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Gordon Lamphere of the Real Finds Podcast. Thank you for listening.